Yeah, so we're gonna have a talk. We decided to just talk to Henrik and Ellen, just keeping it like very low key, not so formal, even though we're sitting in this very formal way. Maybe I'll just say who I am. There you go. I watched some of the movie. I've seen it before. So my name is Storm, and I speak Danish also. So if you have questions and the English is a little bit that you're looking for a word, we can do it in English and help each other out. So it doesn't have to be that. That's like the problem. And do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Rosanna, as you probably know if you just watched the film. And yeah, really happy to be here and to meet you all.
And I'm Ivor. I'm also in the film. Hi, good morning.
How is it actually to like meet people after they've seen it? It's different. You also do live performances where you actually like see people that see you. But how is it to do it this way, where you sit here after with a group of people that just saw?
I think it's really nice because often with the film version, yeah, people watch it and we don't have any connection with them. And that's quite unusual for us because we are normally doing live performance. But yeah, I find it hard to watch the film because I'm not used to that, like actually watching myself. So yeah, I don't know what it was like in here when you were watching it. So I'm kind of a bit intrigued to see, yeah, what the response is.
Yeah, we're hoping that you liked it. And people are smiling a bit, some people not, but that's okay. There's no pressure to like it either. I can cope.
Maybe, I mean, I have some questions written down that at any point, if any of you have a question, you can just raise your hand. Or
just clear one thing out. Have you ever performed this live?
So, sorry, I'm just jumping
No, go for
it. Basically, this, we originally wanted to make a live performance because that's what we make, and we knew we wanted it to be a 3-year process that we'd make alongside the time of Ivor going through gender transition. So we started in 2018, and then when it got to 2021, when we were meant to premiere the live show, at the beginning of that year, we were speaking with the theatre, and they said we're going to be doing a digital festival. So would you be interested in making a digital version? And at first we felt a bit unsure, but we'd already been working with cameras and with all the forced perspective. So we thought maybe this could actually work really well. So we made this version, which we were really happy with. And then we took a year to make the stage version, which is very similar to this, but you see everything happening live as well as on the screen. So it still has a big screen and 2 cameras in the space. And so there's always this kind of multiple perspectives and kind of different ways of looking at what's happening in the action. And that show we premiered in 2022, and it's still touring. We're going to be in Helsinki next week doing it, which is exciting.
and I mean, is there also a part of I was also noticing when they come in the red clothes at the end, they're wearing masks.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was also COVID
Exactly.
related, right? But that's not why you made the film.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were making a show, and then we were part of this festival called Take Me Somewhere, and they said we just have to do a digital festival, and so they gave everyone support to make digital versions of their piece. So that is literally the reason.
It's interesting to see it now because it's so kind of far away already, even though we all like lived through those times. But then when they come in with the mask, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, like this is not just costume. This is like a reminder of a time also.
Exactly.
And now you have this piece that can tour on its own, which is also quite unique.
Yeah.
In the live performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, if we thought of it ourselves, if we planned it, it would be a really clever idea. But it works very well that it can, have this hybrid thing and reach more people, because the theatre show is very big and expensive, and this is a little bit cheaper, so that's good. But it's still the same messages and the same ideas. So I think it's something we now want to think about of what are the different ways that you can create work as well, because then it can reach more people than just having the big stage show.
Yeah, and it's more accessible as well
Mhm.
for some people.
Yeah, there's always a question. Yes?
Was it all shot in one take, or was it sort of multiple takes?
Good question. Yeah, it was all in one take. So we had somebody was mixing it live, like going between the different cameras live. There were some things that got added on afterwards, like the subtitles, but we made it very quickly.
And the cricket.
Oh yeah, so some bits are filmed.
It's hard to get the cricket to do what you want in one take. So.
Yeah. But yeah, so this version, it is very like, it's the first time we did it. We tried to rehearse it, and I think both times the camera stopped working, so we were really like, I hope it works.
Yeah, and it's a weird way to make a film, we realise, because often it makes more sense if you're doing film to just work on one scene and then just get that perfect. But I think because we just really wanted it to have that live feeling and a real direct connection with the audience, and I think because we were in the process of making a show, we wanted to see what it felt like to go through all the material, which you don't really get if you're just doing a little bit at a time. So yeah.
Why did you choose to break the fourth wall when telling sort of a very traditional story?
Great question.
I think the work that we make, we usually would break the fourth wall anyway, like we would talk directly to the audience or move around in the space. And I think like in this piece, the fourth wall keeps changing where it is as well. And so I think we were enjoying playing with that and experimenting with it. And even like if you were making a film, it's quite strange to talk directly to the audience, but it gives you a chance to maybe have more of a connection. So yeah, rather than just here's the story of Pinocchio or here are these people, it's like you have to remember that we are real people at the same time. And I think when we make performance, or when I make performance, it's theatre where maybe I'm pretending to be a character, but it's always me at the same time. And I think like lots of famous actors don't want to do that. They always want to just be the character, but you always know it's still that actor. And yeah, I think that's something we like to do.
I think as well, we were thinking in the piece a lot about reality and fantasy, and I think with Pinocchio, who we know is a puppet who wants to be a real boy, that gave us this question of what does real mean, and that's what we're kind of playing with a lot in how we've staged it. We've said before, we think that sometimes if you're trans or if you're a queer person, you're sort of living between reality and fantasy, and you think a lot about that we have to fantasize and we have to imagine how we can be differently or how the world can be differently in order to change it. So that's kind of played an important part in our own kind of lived experiences. So within the film and the show, we really wanted to play around with reality and fantasy. So it's kind of, yeah, we've got this fantasy world of Pinocchio that it begins in, and then we sort of break that as in like, oh, now we're in the real world of the film studio and we're talking to you. And what we wanted to see is like, could we make those two things become kind of on top of each other and get tangled up? So it wasn't so clear as this is the show and now we're breaking the fourth wall. That's sort of what we do at the beginning, and then it's like, oh, maybe the fantasy is in the reality and they're more complicated or something. That's what we were playing around with a bit as well.
Can I ask a question? How does the impact on the audience change between live performance and movie? Obviously, I guess it loses the live dimension, but does it also gain something? The film version?
Yeah, I think I mean when we first showed the film, it was in lockdown, like, so nobody could go to the theatre, and the messages we got back was that it, people felt very connected to it, and enjoyed that. That they felt like this form was maybe like unique to that time of being disconnected from everyone, but trying to find that connection. So I think that became very important. That's that thought is finished now. Do you have a thought?
I think it's hard for us to know in a way, because we often don't really know what the reaction is to watching the film. I guess something that's different is sometimes when people are watching the film, they're on their own. So there's maybe a chance for a more intimate connection with it, and that's very different to what a big kind of communal experience feels like. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, sometimes we show this film like in this situation where there's people in a real audience, and that the real audience can feel like being in a theatre, so people can feel connected a bit. I don't know if that answers your question.
I was thinking about like how has the choice, or like, I also don't know if you do this in all your practices, also know that you do performances separately, right? But how did it came about to decide to use sort of your own lived experience? I'm thinking both like of like the story of like transitioning, but also like we get quite into the dynamics between the two of you, and your sort of, I mean, the number of times that someone says darling in it is, you know, like this, we have an idea, we're walking into sort of a queer love ship also. And what does that mean to you to do that, and what did you think before and now also?
I think that at the beginning of Ivor kind of exploring his gender, we wanted to have some time to just respond creatively to that, because that is a way for us that we kind of process things that are happening. And before that, we had made some work that was very tied up in like lesbian identity, and we have a kind of punk band that was quite lesbian, and it was like, you know, it sort of like these changes affect our personal life and our work as well. So we thought, let's spend some time together just working creatively, but we won't put any pressure on to make a show, because this is going to be a big thing, and we should just, you know, we'll just do some creative experiments and see if that helps us with this kind of understanding of what this change is and what it means for both of us. And it's partly because we couldn't find that many examples that we could really relate to as well. But then when we started working, sort of being together and thinking about it, and then Pinocchio came in, and then we got quite excited about the idea of the show that we could make. So yeah, but we wanted it to be a really long process, and I think for us the decision to make it was really tied up in us trying to do something that we needed as queer people, and that we weren't seeing represented in a way that we felt like we could relate to it, which we talk about directly in the piece. And I think, I mean, maybe I don't want to talk, but I think in the kind of medical transition process, you have to talk about your experience in such a specific way, and it's quite, you know, binary, and you have to say certain things to the doctor so they can give you the medication, and it's quite, you said you were feeling quite diminished by it, and I think for us making this artwork, it allowed us to express it in a really different way, and to find a way of talking about it that was much more imaginative and fun and full of pleasure and creativity. And we just wanted to have that kind of trans narrative put out into the world, because I don't know what it's like here, but in the UK it's like it's difficult, and yeah, there's just a lot of stories that are being told that are so full of trauma and stuff, and it's really important to have that, but it felt important for us to try and focus on like love and pleasure, and that felt true for us at the time. No, it still does. I don't know if you want to say anything to that.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's maybe not the usual way that people make autobiographical work. So quite often people will make something about an experience that happened a long time ago. But yeah, as Rosanna was saying, we found that making the work was a way to kind of process what was going on, and it was a way for us to talk to each other about our changing identity in a different way, in a sort of different language, and then to find ways that we could explain what was going on to other people, and that felt like a good process to go on, I guess. And then, yeah, we didn't plan that it would have this element of talking about our love for each other or anything. I think, well, I always thought it was just a show about me, and that's not what happened, so that's fine. But yeah, and so I think we were really pleased that this kind of came through, was actually, yeah, it's not just one person on their own, it's like how you exist in a community and with other people. And I think that's been a really important message of the piece. And quite often when we've performed the piece, and like if there's any queer or trans young people in the audience, that they feel like it's really amazing to see like a happy ending, or not that we're about to die, but that
That
there's,
wouldn't be happy.
no, that wouldn't happen. Well, but there's like a happy future, because I think a lot of the conversations around trans young people or queer young people is that it's going to be a hard life and everything is bad, and but our experience of being trans is that it's really amazing, or it can be at sometimes. So.
Could you explain the distinction between actually the performance and the camera and so forth? Because we've got all these different scenes with, you know, the stage and the camera per se. So why do you want to introduce all these different things? How to actually show an image?
Yeah, good question.
I think that we were thinking about perspective and about shifting perspectives. And so the trick that we're using a lot is called forced perspective, when you have someone close to the camera being bigger and someone further away being smaller. And actually the way we got to that was that, so first of all, we work a lot with improvisation, and we were thinking, when people make films, we early on we knew we wanted it to be, the framing of it to be like a making of, because that sort of spoke to our ideas about what it means to be trans, is that you're like in this process of transition, but in a way like it's kind of what it is to be human, that we're all in the process of making. It's not that here's this finished thing. So we were like, a making of feels like a great format for this. And then we were looking at making of documentaries and things, and then we were thinking, because we had these ideas of reality and fantasy, we were looking at what are all the ways in theatre and in film that people try and make things real that aren't real, and just looking at all the kind of trickery that there is, and that was really fun, and that's how we got into doing the forced perspective. So we're sort of looking at, yeah, again, it's that kind of blurring this distinction between what's real and what isn't, and you know, kind of saying you can look at things in lots of different ways, and that's where a lot of those ideas came in, to have the different cameras and some of those tricks. Yeah, and that sort of framing of it as a making of came very early in the process, and that gave us then instructions for what material to make. So it's like, what happens in a making of? Oh, well, there'll be people talking to camera about the roles that they're playing, and there'll be demonstrations, and it, you know, we find that often when we're making performance, we're looking for some kind of form or framing that then can like hold the themes that we're working with, and then it tells us what kinds of material to make that will fit into that.
Yeah, and I think also on a very basic level, we were like, okay, how do people talk about transition? So I don't know if there's still this, but lots of people make YouTube videos, or now it would be TikTok, I guess, of like when you start taking hormones, how your voice changes. So you do, this is my voice on testosterone on day 1, and then this is my voice on day 82 or something. And we were interested in this way of looking at how time passes and how change happens. So that was something, I think we always do that, is like you start doing research, and some of it is very, sometimes we read very philosophical books, but then other times we're just on YouTube going, oh, it might be fun to try this. So this idea that you could show a change just by having a YouTube video. I mean, we made a lot of videos of ourselves. Originally we had an idea that these videos could talk to each other, like your future self could talk to your past self. And in the end, it only ended up with that, the video of me playing the ukulele, but that, yeah, so we're always looking for these kind of simple ways of explaining a situation. And I think you're right that it's lots of different ways to add it up, and that feels important to us, that there's not just one way of explaining something, or it's always these different things. And I remembered that early on we do a lot of improvising and making up texts as we go along, but we do a lot of writing, of just doing like automatic writing. And some of the things that were coming up, you were talking about how when I was changing, it's like you're looking at someone through a camera and it's going in and out of focus. So the person looks the same, but something is changing. So we just had that as an idea. So we're always trying to have these senses in the space, and then how do you show that? So yeah, kind of goes in and out of like an idea, and then something very practical of like, okay, you have to show these different things.
Yes, I have a question about, you're talking about boxes, and you're talking about coming from this solid lesbian identity, and then poking fun of now seeming like a normal heterosexual couple. And but in reality, it seems like you have both transitioned towards a greater fluidity. And I wonder how are you able also to have a conversation with doctors about that? I mean, give me just enough testosterone to become something in between, or isn't that the most difficult thing actually to try to explain how you can be everything?
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe I should send this to my doctor, and that would maybe help. Yeah, you're right. It is difficult with the doctors that I've seen, and in the way that the health services in the UK at the moment. There's very long waiting times, and yeah, I had to go private to pay for this, and yeah, there was definitely a sense that you have to tell a story about yourself that is what they want to hear. So we talk about, the blue fairy at the beginning is like, you have to tell your story, and you have to make it convincing, and you have to do blah, blah, blah. So, and that creates a kind of anxiety of like, I'm not telling my truth, I'm just trying to tell the right story to get the right hormones. Also, at the same time that you don't know what's going to feel right, or what change is going to be good. So yeah, that is a difficult thing, and I think, but we're all doing that, of having to be different people for different situations, and I guess the important thing is, do you know in yourself what is true? so I think for me, like performing this piece is part of trying to connect to what is true for me, even though I'm going on stage and I'm pretending, but that feels very true to me, and it's trying to hold on to something that feels right, that is changing. It's hard to kind of explain that to other people, and I think early on in my transition, they really want you to have known all your life that you're definitely trans and that everything's been hard, but I didn't really know. So it's you're trying to tell a story, I guess. But.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good point that you raise, and a very clear reading of the work as well. This idea of moving from something very solid into something very fluid is sort of what we're trying to do with the piece. But I think obviously people have existed forever who live outside of the gender binary, and but we are in a time now where it is like, could be seen as almost like trans assimilation. So it's like, yes, okay, you're trans, therefore you need to go completely to the other end of the binary. So you don't want to be a woman, okay, well, you can be a man. But that kind of room for the space in the middle. I think there's so much more discourse and awareness is being raised about that. But and obviously some trans people do want to have a binary kind of gender expression. But I think I think in younger generations as well, I feel like there's so much more awareness of this and the different possibilities, which is so brilliant and exciting. But I don't, from our experience, the medical profession, it's very much about still kind of making you conform to one or the other. But there are people, who are able to kind of access hormones and not be going all the way. And it's about finding out what feels right for you and trying to find the space for that.
I mean, just to clarify, because you come from a UK context, I think what you're saying is the same in Denmark.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it's not any different. I mean, just to bring it here, and we actually just had our previous Minister of Equality, who was just, I don't know, went somewhere else. She just in public made a very, very strong attack on trans rights, threatening to sort of take back access, especially for children, to access gender affirming care and stuff. So it sounds, actually people are going to the UK online to get access to hormones through the private system, because that is very, very limited here.
Right, okay.
And the same, it's not really possible to go and say I just want a little bit, or I just want to try, or I'm not quite sure. It is very
you have to be
you're sure, and it has to always have been that way. Up until a few years ago, you had to bring your parents in often to testify that they had also seen that you were a trans child. Not considering that maybe people grew up in homes that didn't allow them to be trans. So I saw that there was a few questions that I didn't need to take the time. Yes?
And this is so much good question, but I was just wondering about, because you have quite a lot of implications about sexual content in the film, and I think a lot of us said, and was quite surprised about how this relates to, especially about the Pinocchio story, but also just the transition and stuff. Because what's the about that?
Do you mean the kind of stupid?
What was the pleasure I was seeing? Because it's quite different. That a lot of people, it isn't really what I think about when I say Pinocchio. That's it's quite a different thing, right? Just how does that relate to the transition? Probably that makes sense in some ways, but
I think that obviously the piece is partly about our relationship as well, and so sexuality kind of is tied up in that. And I think that when we were thinking about Pleasure Island, and what are the different ways we could think about what that scene would be. I think with that scene, yeah, I mean, it could be read in lots of different ways, so I don't want to kind of close it down, but I think, again, it felt fun and important for us to think about like the kind of a queer approach to sex and sexuality and change and fluidity and possibility. And I think we knew we really wanted to centre kind of pleasure in the work, and that sex is kind of part of that. And as we're a couple, it's a part of our life and a part of our relationship. And I think there's like a real obsession around like, you know, if you transition, what does that mean for your sexuality then? And, you know, what does that mean your genitals are going to be, and all these things. And I think we wanted to kind of go into that in quite a playful way, where we were kind of taking control over that potential kind of sexualization of us or something. Yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah, I think it's it's a bit silly. It's a bit like childish of like what, in my mind, it's like, okay, what would, in the Pinocchio story, it's like these naughty boys who go to Pleasure Island, and it's like, what would they do if they were like pretending to have sex and like doing all this kind of stuff? And it's sort of silly, but it's also what I hope is that it's kind of this silly, funny, weird thing, but that as we change how we look, you maybe get these ideas of like, what would it be like when they're having sex, or if we're using, you know, if we're using a strap-on and a dildo, like that is a thing that happens, but and then these sticks that are kind of like noses but are also like penises that are, I don't know, it's kind of, yeah, it's everything all together. And then in that scene, because we're doing this, we have these noses on, so we're kind of lying all the time, so having this bored conversation about big ideas, but we're always lying, and I don't know, yeah, it's messy, like sex. But funny, like sex. Maybe.
Could you elaborate on the role of the cricket?
All right.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how funny sex is? The role of the cricket. I think we, we looked a lot at the Disney version of Pinocchio, and in the Disney version, the whole thing starts with the cricket saying, "Oh, let me tell you this story about this boy." And so we really like this idea of it being all held as a fairy tale, and it just felt like a very easy way to have something hyper real, like really alive cricket there. I think at some point we thought maybe he would interact with us more, but it's really, he's framing everything, so you can't get away from how this kind of male patriarchal voice is describing everything. And it's quite fun to have a real cricket. Can you remember?
But isn't it eating on something? Oh,
it's eating an apple at some point, yeah.
Because it's got loads of really interesting connotations, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think that's in the bit where it's sort of talking about the theatre and putting yourself in the stage, and so there's a lot of stuff in it about like the consumption of trans narratives as well. But also I think you in particular are always interested in bringing the natural world into the process.
That's true.
And you know, with all the kind of discussion about the whale as well, I think and Tim, who's the designer, is really interested in the non-human world and how we can like always be remembering how much there is on this planet that isn't just human ways of thinking and being and doing. So I think that for us, it's really exciting to be always kind of bringing animal ways of being in as well, and that, it's so amazing to look at that cricket up close, actually, and to think about, yeah, just all these different things that exist and ways of being.
At the end, when you're lying on the ground, I think you say that maybe we'll never finish this movie. Was that ending planned, or did you just come up with it as you went along?
It was planned, that idea to have that, but then the text, the long text of like, oh, we could be this or we could be that, that was kind of improvised. Like, I'd done it a few times, but in the moment I was just thinking of new ideas. Now in the show it is set, but yeah, we were still in a place when we were making that where a lot of the text is still semi-improvised because we hadn't quite set it. But so yeah, that list is just kind of lying there and trying to imagine more and more and more. Yeah.
When you make a piece like this, often people either write books or make artworks, and they leave a part of themselves in that artwork. Did you feel like you left a part of yourself in the artwork that you can look back on, or is it more like the fluid transition where you don't really feel like you left a part of yourself, or more like evolved through it and kept it forward?
Lovely question. I think I was doing a bit of writing about this show recently, and I realised in this piece there's so much about being in a state of fluidity, and you know, that text at the end, you can be this and I can be this and I can be this, and so much of the material in this piece came from when we were in this time of, you know, really big changes happening. And in a way, in our kind of personal lives, the changes that felt very big have kind of settled down. It's sort of like, it's almost like we were in this place of reshaping, and now we're in a new mold, and that's kind of more fixed, but we're constantly performing the live show, we keep coming back to it. And for me, what that reminds me of is about this sort of commitment to allowing the possibility of each other, because I think, yeah, we've been together now about 14 years, and so, and it like, even it's you know, you can get quite fixed as well, and you can think, oh, I was always like this, and I'm always like that, and he likes doing that and I like doing that. And I think our sort of, it's almost a utopic idea in the show that we can be in a relationship and we can be changing and we can allow each other to be different. And I think that that's something that we've sort of put into that show and really infused in it. And so when we come back to that material and those bits of text, it's something that I'm like trying to remember and re-embody, yeah, and take forward, even though the changes might not seem so kind of big and obvious, but that, yeah, that we're always shifting, and to allow that in each other, I think.
Yeah, I think it's quite strange because this piece, yeah, we're still performing it, but it started in 2018, and so it's like all those different elements are all there in it, which is quite confusing. But like, so at the beginning of making the piece, we didn't know what it was going to be, or if it was going to be anything that would keep going. We didn't know. We didn't know if we would actually stay together as a couple, because maybe it would be too big a change, or we didn't know what it would be like to transition, or if I would be able to get the hormones that I needed at certain points. So there's a lot of unknowns and kind of worries tied up in it, I guess. But yeah, by doing it again and again, maybe it helps to remember like the kind of good things that have happened from it. And yeah, but that's hard to remember if you don't. I don't know how I would remember that if I wasn't doing a performance every few months. But I should write it down or something.
do you have any thoughts about how long you think you will continue with performing in it? Will you stop at some point for internal reasons, or will it just be going on as long as somebody will pay you?
It's a good question, because now we've been touring the live show for 3 years, and this autumn we're doing a lot of shows still, and it still feels really good to do it, for me and I think other people in the team. But I think being on tour a lot is in some ways really amazing, but I think both of us are feeling like we want to have a bit of time at home and maybe starting some different projects, so we might shift to not doing quite as much touring next year. But it would be hard to know if we actually get to a time where we're like, we don't want to do this. And I can tell you a secret about the live show, which is that it's got a kind of trick at the end, which is that film, the bit where we're lying on the floor and I'm saying we could be this or we could be this. We're doing that live in the space, and you can see the person up the ladder filming us, and we're there on the floor, and you're watching it on the big screen. But then we actually get up and we walk down to the front, and the film keeps playing. So then you realise that it was a film and it wasn't happening live. So it's a kind of final trick. But the film, we filmed it in 2022. So we always have to look exactly like we do in that film. So we have to make sure we get our hair the same. And now I am like, how long? Like, we're 3 years older now, and it will be interesting to see how long we can keep doing it without remaking.
I'm getting so grey.
Yeah.
Like, more wrinkles, like just weird old man. Like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be really good. We'd have fantasies about if we were doing it in our 70s or something. And
Do it?
Like, oh, I did. I'll get a replacement.
Yeah. I think for us, ultimately it's work as well. So we're lucky that people want it. It's our way of earning money, which is great. But yeah, we do want to get going with new other projects as well, because it's taken a lot of our time in the past few years. Yeah.
Maybe you want to end by telling us, do you have any other projects, like ideas or?
Or did you have one?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, at what point during your journey and transitioning did you decide on Pinocchio as your sort of metaphor or story? Was it sort of very quick, or was it more a thought through sort of decision?
I'm bad with time, but can you?
Well, it was weird because in the process that we were making, we made a show before this one called Moot Moot, which was very different, and it was before you'd sort of come out as trans.
Yeah.
But when we were in that process, Ivor was like, I'm thinking we could look at Pinocchio, and I was like, okay, like it didn't really make much sense. And so we were being these like, it was sort of about connection and disconnection, and we were these weird talk radio.
No, but it started off that we were looking at ideas of good and evil.
That's true.
And
That is
morality.
true. Yeah, that's
like,
where it came from.
How to be good and stuff. So it came from like the idea that Pinocchio has to be a very good boy to get
That is
to
true.
turn into a real boy. And so, it was weird. All of a sudden, I was like dressing up as Pinocchio, and it had nothing to do with anything else we were doing. So it had been an idea from a past show, and then as I think quite early on, as we were working on it, we thought maybe it could work.
Yeah, it did come in quite early. I think it was in our first residency in 2018 that we started thinking, oh, this is maybe where Pinocchio. This is maybe why you were looking at Pinocchio, or like, subconsciously. And we just were like, oh, let's start using Pinocchio as almost like a palette for us to create with. So, and we just found it really useful, and we felt like it gave us this world of fantasy and imagination that took us, beyond just the very straight autobiography. And I think that's what we were really excited about.
Yeah, and it kind of felt a bit like like a joke, like it was a pretend thing of, oh, imagine if the best the best explanation you could have of being a trans man was Pinocchio. Like there's nothing else to look at, so we have to look at Pinocchio. And I think that's a useful thing to hold on to if you're trying to make something, is like, it might seem like it's something really silly or stupid or other people don't understand it, but if it keeps coming back, or it resonates for you, then that's a really useful kind of thing to hold on to.
Yeah, and I think as well, it really helped us. It helps audiences connect with the story hugely, in a really different way to if it was just our story. And I think that, like, as queer people, it's just very fun and kind of subversive to take these like children's stories or things that are, you know, really well known, and then just do whatever you want with them. And that's kind of, we were just using it for our own ends.
But the new piece that we're working on doesn't have that clever idea yet, so it's very hard to hold on to. Oh, I think. But it's about time.
Yeah, we're continuing to work with cameras, and we're doing a lot of performing at lots of different speeds at the same time, and filming it and slowing it down and speeding it up, and we've been looking a lot at different animals and how they experience time and how time changes in our lives. So yeah, that's one show that we're doing, and I'm also doing a project where I'm hopefully going to be making like a queer charity shop, so trying to make a space that's like where queer, trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming people can go and be supported to like explore and express their identity, and there'll be like secondhand clothes and things like that, and also workshops, and yeah, want to try and build something that can sustain itself by making money that can then help people, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was really amazing questions you all had.
Yeah.
Great.
I only got to like ask 2 of the ones I brought, which is a shame, but